All right, we'll call to order at 7:05 Mountain Time, 9:05 Eastern. If you could take attendance, Paul, if you're ready.
All right. Uh, Miss Arrowwood, presumably not here. Although if you want your job back, speak now. I am present. Mr. Siselski,
I am here.
Mr. Latham,
I am also here.
Mr. Martin,
Present.
Mr. Rolette,
Here.
Mr. Rufo. Okay, we'll come back to him. Mr. Seebeck.
Here.
Dr. Moulton.
Here.
Okay, so that is, and Madam Chair.
Oh, yes, definitely here.
Okay, so that is two absent primaries. So we'll do the alternates now. Mr. Tomaso. All right, Mr. Roberson.
Here.
Okay, Mr. Deal. Mr. Roots. Mr. Logan.
Here.
Mr. Rogers.
Here.
Okay. Madam Chair, we have 8 primaries and 3 alternates. At this time, Mr. Roberson and Mr. Logan would be filling in for Miss Arrowwood and Mr. Rufo, respectively.
Okay, perfect. And Mr. Rufo tends to come a few minutes late, though I just reminded him because his child has hockey this night of the week that was a later development, but I reminded him. So I'll let you know if I hear back that we should expect him. All right, next thing on, and he is typing right now. He says he's going to be late. All right, a reminder, we're going to go to public comment, but I did want to remind everyone that we have a town hall set for January 11th, though I have not yet spoken to the party chair about their schedule for being able to get an email out on it. If you all are wondering why that's so important, they have an editorial schedule and really zealously guard party-wide emails, for fundraising and things like that. So as long as I can get this to work with their schedule, we will have a town hall. If for some reason that doesn't work, because they tend to do their editorial calendar a month out, but I can usually wheedle my way into it. But I might have used all my political capital on all the other ones that I've managed to wheedle my way into. So now it's opportunity for public comment. So if anyone would like to speak, use the reaction button to raise your hand. That would also include members of the committee if you have things to say which are not necessarily something that would fit on the agenda. Mr. Bracco.
Since you brought the topic of town halls, I know the January 11th, hopefully everything goes well with that. And then there's one scheduled the day before the national convention. Do you plan to have an additional one in between those two?
What I hope to have between those two, and if I can't have this, it would probably be another town hall, because what I am suggesting has never been done before. So it would require a lot of planning, and not really so sure how it would do, and I'd need Angela's cooperation for it. I have to tell Wayne to shut the door when he's done and just put this breeze in. Is I'd like to do a mock convention of at least the bylaws proposal with presumptive delegates. Now, this is not something that's ever been done before, so exactly how that would work out. So maybe about a month out. And I think that would give us a lot more feedback than any survey would, and that any town hall would, because we'd actually debate the proposals. We'd pretend like we're presenting them and have votes and everything. And we would see potentially what arguments will be raised for and against and how the votes go. And that might help us refine. So rather than having an additional town hall between the January one and the one the day before convention, is I'd like to do that mock convention. If for some reason that proves unfeasible, then we'll do another town hall. But I'm kind of excited about that idea. Even if it doesn't go like perfectly smoothly, I think it'll give us a lot of really valuable feedback. And I'd like to invite the platform committee, if they want to participate as well. So it'll be a little mini mock convention with the bylaws and platform proposals. Mr. Bracco.
And I believe I caught you said that was a month out from the convention, so maybe mid to late April. Is that correct?
Yeah, because I want it to be the presumptive delegates. So the people that would be invited would be the people that were already chosen by their states. There will be a few states that have very late conventions, maybe one or two. And I will talk with the state chairs of those states about who they would like to be invited. But nearly every state by then will have chosen their delegates and alternates. And that is specifically who would be invited. Now, other people can come and observe. But again, I'm intending really like on having this close to the type of people that will be at convention. So we have a really good idea, and it will help me refine my argument. So if there's an argument I make that's a real dog, I know not to use that at convention and to come up with something better. And if something did well, to, use that. So this is an experiment though, and no guarantee it can happen, but that's where my mind is at. Hey, anyone further? Is Mr. C? Yes, Mr. Seebeck is here. I had said that I would immediately recognize Mr. Seebeck because he had indicated opposition to, excuse me, the chair's decision to set meetings for every Thursday. Just an FYI per the policy manual, it's 1/5 of the committee or the chair on their own initiative can set meetings. So I, on my own initiative, even I did talk to you guys about it, but said we were going to be meeting every Thursday. And pursuant to the policy manual, that's actually binding, but I just don't chair committees that way. So I'm inviting the committee to overrule me, Mr. Seebeck. And it's not really like a ruling of the chair. It's just that I will withdraw that if a majority of the committee opposes me. So Mr. Seebeck wanted to make a motion that I believe that a majority of the committee would say, no, we don't want meetings every Thursday. We want to keep to the schedule we have. And again, I welcome that motion. I don't like running things like a dictatorship. So Mr. Seebeck, you have the floor.
I do make that motion, and I would like to speak to it.
Yes, please.
I'm chair of my state's bylaws committee, and our bylaws are a mess, and we have a challenge of getting our committee to meet on given times. And one of the available times happens to be on the off Thursdays that we are not meeting on this committee. I would also point out that we have a platform committee coming up after the New Year's, which is also going to take up time. And there are also other things in preparation for both state and national conventions that are going to be taking up time. We've already got too many proposals to meet our window at the national convention. We've got way too many of them. And I don't see the point of pushing further and accelerating meetings for stuff that we're not going to get to in the first place. It's a lot simpler to simply make a note of these issues and either leave that as a notation for consideration of the next bylaws committee, or to have them on hand to the delegates to say, hey, this happened. But we're already overloaded. We got more things coming on the plate after the new year, going into a presidential election cycle and a national convention with all the other state activities going on at the same time and some national ones. I don't see where we have the time to take to put forth the effort to do these things when it's not going to wind up not being heard on the floor anyway.
Mr. Seebeck, would you entertain a couple questions that I had?
I have a couple questions actually to ask.
Oh, sure. Do you want to ask them first, or would you like me to
Sure.
ask? Sure, go ahead then.
First question. How many proposals have we looked at in this committee since day one?
Oh, I would have to look that up. I do have a chart. Did you have, my damn computer's making me relog in. Did you have any other ones while I'm relogging into this account?
Yes, related. How many are left to look at?
That I can tell you first. So, because I have the agenda up, we have, one second, let me just count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 left.
And how many weeks do we have left on this current schedule?
Can you explain what you mean by current schedule?
How many more meetings do we have on in the queue before deadline on the current every other Thursday schedule?
Well, we don't have hard deadlines. We have ones that I have put in place, but that the committee can overrule. And that kind of relates to the question I had for you. We wanted to be done. Well, I don't want to say we. I wanted us to be done by the town hall. So math is hard. So I suppose you could look at a calendar and see how many between now and January 11th.
Because my state bylaws committee has a January 19th deadline for our February convention. And in 2 weeks, I will be not here anyway because I will be out of town on family. So, and the question also becomes, who else is going to be out of town between Christmas and New Year's on family as well? We have the holiday gap as well as everything else going on.
I wanted to answer your other question, if you would. And I think, and you inadvertently answered the question I has is when is your Alabama bylaws committee starting its meetings?
We started our meetings this past week.
Okay. And platform's not going to be able to start until January. You just know that because what Wyoming is MIA, they're not going to appoint anybody, but under the bylaws, we have to wait to the end of the year to give them the opportunity to. I think everyone except for Pennsylvania and Wyoming have appointed. And I'm going to let, if it's okay, Dr. Moulton talk while I'm looking for the answer to your other question. Dr. Moulton?
Yeah, I favor getting through all the proposals. I realize we have more proposals than we're going to have time for at the convention. That doesn't mean that these last few proposals won't be some of the ones we pick. We're going to whittle down and order and prioritize our proposals. But it was made clear from the very beginning, at least it was the bargain that I understood, that we would hear proposals first come, first serve, with the understanding that we would hear everything everyone brought forward. And there's some people who have not had their proposals heard yet. And I want to get through all of them. I'm fine with doing that either of two ways. Either we can meet more often or we can extend the deadline longer, like to the end of January. I'm comfortable with either one. But I don't think that we should not hear the proposals. I want to hear them all. So secondly, the notion that some committee members will have conflicts. We have alternates on this committee for a reason. And if some committee members can't make it, that's not the end of the world. It would be nice if we could pick times and dates that everyone can make. But if that's not possible, I don't think we should sacrifice hearing these proposals. And as for my availability, I will be traveling to Pennsylvania for some family stuff, but I can still make time on Thursday nights, unless I'm on a plane one of those nights. I'll have to look it up, but I think I should be able to make all the meetings. So that's it. So I favor scheduling more meetings. In the alternative, if we don't schedule more meetings, I favor pushing back to the end of January so we can hear all the proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moulton. And to answer your question, it might not be exact, Mr. Sivak, because I have a very easy chart. If we hear all of the, so just -9, now I lost the number. I believe it's 39 proposals that we have. We still have 9 to hear, so 30. Thereabouts 30 have been passed already. Mr. Bracco.
I think a few of those have been withdrawn, but anyway.
No,
taking those out?
I've taken those out.
So if the goal is to get through all the proposals prior to the January 11th planned town hall, maybe we can do it, maybe we can't. If I'm looking at the calendar correctly, that would mean that we're adding a meeting on December 21st, so a week from today, and January 4th, because there's already one scheduled for December 28th. Whether people can make that or not, it is currently scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
Once that town hall is completed, would you view the urgency as diminished and we return back to every other week schedule, or would you plan to continue the every week cadence after that January 11th meeting?
If we haven't gotten through all the proposals, I would continue that until we did. But my goal in doing this is to get through them all before January 11th. Mr. Latham.
So
I'm sorry, Mr. Bracco, let me continue.
Just to clarify then, my question is, whenever we get through the proposals, so January 11th target, sure, would your intention be to revert back to a every other week schedule once all the proposals have gotten through? Okay.
And I can tell you, anyone that people submit after today, because we've had so many discussions about this, I'm not viewing as urgent. And that's not going to count towards my every week thing. When I say get through the proposals, I mean the ones that are on the docket now. Because I've been talking about a deadline, and Dr. Moulton has expressed his view about all of them getting heard, which I'm very sympathetic towards, which is why I did this. But there's probably going to be some more people are going to think of. I've thought of a few. I just didn't want to be murdered, so I didn't propose them. But when I say get through them all, I mean as they exist today. Other ones, I think the committee's not going to have very much patience for that. And I would encourage everyone to become highly skilled in reading the room. Mr. Latham.
Yeah, and I'm good either way. I looked at my schedule. I can make either. And I was going to speak to the notion that, yes, if we got through what we felt we needed to get through, we could go back to every other week. And for what it's worth, the ones I added at the end, I would not be hurt or offended if we did not address those. I drafted those, I think, at our chair's request or suggestion. So for what that's worth, I don't feel invested in hearing those one way or the other, but they're there.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Latham. So in the interest, I don't see any other hands. So I think we should go to a vote on this so that while I do see Mr. Seebeck, go ahead, Mr. Seebeck.
My biggest objection on this, besides schedule timing, is the simple fact that we have been trying to find every single possible issue with these bylaws and trying to come up with a proposal to fix them. And while that's laudable in one respect, it's also it's making the perfect the enemy of the good. We have a limited time frame. We've already got 39 proposals on the pile, one way or another. Okay, that is way too many for the time frame we have at the convention. What's going to happen to the ones that we whittle down? Are they going to be just dropped into oblivion, dropped into a report to give to the next bylaws committee? Don't know. But the point of it is that we need to address the priority ones, and we've been gone so far down in the weeds and literally spent on some of these proposals weeks ironing out minutiae on things. Electronic voting is a perfect example of that. And I see this one that's coming up on this whole malfeasance and removal and suspension that's been discussed on the list as being another one. How long is it going to take for us to figure out how many pins we're dancing on the heads of all this minutiae to the point where we're not going to get everything accomplished. We've got a good pile of proposals. Let's take the time now and get them settled down. We should be preparing for this town hall by getting it ready with what we have, not continuing to pile on. If I want a fire hose on bylaws, I'll go join a fire department.
Thank you, Mr. Seebeck. I did want to clarify one thing. I did make a commitment to the committee that any proposals we did not get to, I was going to put in a post-convention report. So that was a commitment I did make as chair. So we do know what will happen to ones that we don't get to. I don't know how much solace that is to anybody, but that is something that I already committed to do. Okay, I believe we are ready for the vote. So the motion is that Mr. Seebeck is asking the committee to direct the chair to keep the schedule as is, and the chair has agreed to abide by the will of the committee, whether required or not. So a yes vote would keep the committee every other week. A no vote would say, no, we're going to follow the chair's instructions of every week until we get through these remaining 9 proposals, no more. Mr. Bracco, if you could take the roll.
Sorry, I should have been quicker on that. Forgot that I was doing that today. I will vote no. Mr. Siselsky.
No.
Mr. Latham.
I'm abstaining.
Mr. Martin.
Abstain.
Mr. Roulette.
No.
Mr. Seebeck.
Yes.
Dr. Moulton.
No.
Mr. Roberson.
Yes.
Mr. Logan.
No.
Madam Chair, that is 2, 3, 4, 5 yes, or sorry, 2 yes, 5 no, and 2 abstain.
Okay, I will not be voting, so the motion failed. We will be going every week until we get through these 9. Remember, calling the question is allowed on these committees now. So the speed of these, though quality might suffer, is in our hands. Just wanted to remind everyone that you do have that power. I will not be calling the question on anything. I leave that up to the committee. Mr. Seebeck, you had your hand still raised?
I have a further motion.
Okay.
Because of this vote, I move that we put the proposal that we had previously heard regarding shifting the times of appointments to these committees into the report, regardless of how everything is ordered, because of the nature of what's happened here. And I'd like to speak to it a little further.
You're not going to like what I have to say, but I'm ruling that out of order at this moment. It wasn't on the agenda as something we were going to hear, and we are going to be discussing the ordering and what must be in the report when we're done with the proposals, and you'll have the opportunity at that time. Do you wish to appeal the ruling of the chair?
I do appeal the ruling from the chair.
Okay, I believe I've spoken to it sufficiently. So you want to speak to your appeal? And to be clear, my ruling is that this motion's out of order at this time. So go ahead, Mr. Seebeck.
The motion is not out of order at this moment because we have not called for an orders of the day regarding the current agenda, and there is no motion pending on the floor.
Okay, would anyone else like to speak to the ruling of the chair? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go to a roll call vote. Mr. Bracco, I'll remind the committee that this vote is slightly opposite. It's one of those unusual situations where the noes have to carry. A yes vote sustains the ruling of the chair. A no vote overrules the ruling of the chair. It takes a majority no to overrule. So again, yes sustains, no overrules. Mr. Bracco.
I will abstain. Mr. Siselsky.
Yes.
Mr. Latham.
Abstain.
Mr. Martin,
Yes.
Mr. Roulette,
Yes.
Mr. Seebeck,
No.
Mr. Moulton, or Dr. Moulton, apologies,
Yes.
Mr. Roberson,
No.
Mr. Logan.
Yes.
So that is 1, 2, 5 yes, 3 or nope. 5 yes, 2 no's, 2 abstains.
Okay, the ruling of the chair is sustained. I will not be voting, obviously. So we're going to move on to the first item on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. I don't know if these really just got posted. If there's no objection, I'd like to move this to the next meeting because I'm not so sure everyone had sufficient time to read them. And even if they did, Ms. Arrowwood's not here to talk if there's any questions or corrections. Is there any objection to moving this approval to the next meeting? Okay, seeing none, is Mr. Roulette is here, is he not?
Yep.
Okay, because it's I remember you had a speech. So we are moving, and let me share the screen to Mr. Roulette's proposal of interrupting microphone is the short title. It's proposal DD. I'm going to be getting it on the screen, but you have the floor, Mr. Roulette.
Okay. This is my favorite proposal, and getting this implemented was my main reason for applying to the Bylaws Committee. I don't know how many conventions you all have been to, and even if you've been to a few of them, we're far enough away from the most recent one that the minute details may have faded from memory. Over the past few years, I have watched and listened to every convention that I could find, and over the last few weeks, they've been my background music. It's from that vantage point I want to bring to you again the awareness that abuse of point of order, point of personal privilege, and point of information is the main reason for most of the dysfunction of our conventions. And yes, I say dysfunction. It's normal in good years and bad that while a motion is on the floor, 70% of the time is spent in one of those 3 interrupting motions, while the other 30% is spent on attempts to suspend the rules or on substantive debate. Although we're used to it, new delegates, and also anyone who is not a convention regular, is usually flabbergasted. That 70-30 split should not be normal for us. In 2020, I racked my brain about what a solution might be, and I asked others for input. One solution, which I don't like very much, but which was popular, was along the lines of a special rule of order that no delegate may rise to a point of order or privilege more than twice during any convention. I've dismissed that as being too cumbersome because the chair shouldn't have to keep a list of people up at the podium and check it off. And besides, the goal is not to stop good points of order. It's instead to make them the exception rather than the rule. That's the main benefit of having a special microphone just for interrupting. There are many other benefits, including increased civility and clarity for the average delegate about where we are in the process. But the main one is to get those motions treated the way they should be treated. I'd like to thank Karen Ann for her arguments against this on the list, and I'll respond to her 2 basic criticisms, although I suspect she limited herself to just 2 and has more ready. The first is the use of the may clause, making it optional for the chair to use or not use this procedure. I put that in there on purpose because if having only one microphone gets too cumbersome for whatever reason, I'd like the chair to have the flexibility of reverting. Flexibility is our friend here. The other concern is that if this passes, delegate rights will be put in jeopardy because they might not be able to make it to the central microphone fast enough. I have to ask you, sitting back and pondering in your honest mind, do you really think that will be a problem in any convention that we have? That rules will be broken left and right, and libertarians will not be able to stem the terrible tide of irregularities that because business will have moved too swiftly. I'll bet a signed copy of Atlas Shrugged that will never happen. Like I said, many of us have gotten so used to this that we are immune to the pain, but the pain still exists. Let's put the shotgun on the shelf instead of keeping it right next to the door.
Thank you, Mr. Roulette. Those are my main arguments. I did not hold back on the list, but I want to more strongly, or maybe more clearly, because debating on the list, as everyone knows, is like torture for me. There's no purpose in having a rule that's a may when the chair can already may do that if it was a valid rule. But it's not a valid rule. This rule is just out of order. And the minute it gets proposed, if it passes this committee, it will be subject to a point of order that won't be at a particular microphone because the rule hasn't been suspended. And we will waste a half an hour arguing about this rule. Us passing a proposal that we know is going to draw an immediate point of order is, and not that, well, this isn't relevant. It'll draw an immediate point of order. It's not that it may violate rights. It does violate rights. You have an absolute right as a delegate to keep your ass in your chair and yell point of order. You can pass all the rules you want in the world. You can't violate that, because the minute another person is recognized when a breach of the bylaws has occurred, well, the bylaws isn't the right one, a breach of the rules of the order has occurred, and someone else has been recognized, you can't make it. And yeah, I would bet 1,000,000 copies of signed. I would dig Ayn Rand out of the grave and use her skeletal hand to sign it, that yes, multiple times they will not be able to get to the mic. The answer to this is the convention chair enforcing the rules and making examples of people. That is the answer. I don't believe points of order get abused very often. Points of parliamentary inquiry and points of information, which really we need to start referring to as requests for information, because that's what they are, do get abused absolutely constantly, and it's as annoying as hell. But the solution is not to violate the rights of the people who are using it properly. And what are you going to do if someone does it at a wrong microphone? You're going to not recognize it and tell them to go across the room to another microphone? And I could tell you the setup that we already planned on convention oversight is 4 microphones. This would require a 5th one somewhere. We don't have a graceful place for that. But in any event, it will violate members' rights, and it's completely out of order. I'm not going to do this because I know it's your favorite proposal and I want there to be a vote on it, and let's let the delegates debate it on the floor. But I think I'd be perfectly in my rights to even rule the motion out of order, because I think it's a rule that's completely out of order, particularly when it comes to points of order. And also certain points of personal privilege. Something I want to explain to people they might not understand, and I think delegates don't understand this, and the chair is going to have a worksheet from me that hopefully she'll accept. I obviously can't boss the chair around on explaining this to delegates at the very beginning. Points of personal privilege, points of information, requests for information are not interrupting motions unless they are of an urgent nature, such as you cannot meaningfully participate because the 15 people talking behind you are talking so loud that you can't hear. That's a point of personal privilege. That is urgent. But if your point of personal privilege is, can we have a recess in 30 minutes because there's diabetics in the room, people are understanding that this is a Reno reference, is not urgent at that moment. You can wait in line. And the chair needs to enforce that and make some examples in the very beginning, very strictly, and it will stop. There also needs to be informational sheets and I'm talking with the Convention Oversight Committee about this, on the delegate chairs or in the convention notebooks that explain this. I am putting out a delegate manual that explains this. This is the way to solve it. You cannot stop a person from violating it. If, say, the chair said, you're out of order for calling a point of order without being at that mic, that ruling about of order is immediately subject to somebody yelling point of order, because you can't do that. I feel your pain, but it is completely, I'm using the Roberts term of illegal, not as in the law, but as in violating member rights. Thank you. I don't know who is next, so I'm just going in order. Mr. Seebeck.
Actually, Mr. Roulette was ahead of me.
Okay, well, but this was
I'm pretty
Mr.
sure I
Roulette's
wasn't.
motion, so I'm going to let people who haven't spoken first.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Madam Chair, for telling us about the 4 microphones. That's something we didn't know. And that actually kind of addresses the question I was looking at, was the logistics of doing some of this. The other problem with it is simply this. If you had an extra microphone specifically for interrupting things like point of order, point of information, or whatever, you're going to take more time for people to get on whatever side of the room they're on to that microphone just to make that point of order or whatever it is, to be told it's the wrong one if it's not valid. And that's just going to eat up more time on the floor conducting business rather than actually conducting business. That's not going to solve anything. Now, this is going to be my 5th convention coming up here. In the past, we've used 2 microphones almost exclusively. And when there's been an issue of a point of information or point of order, the people making a request to get to a microphone, the people standing in line tend to defer to that person making the point. They understand that courtesy, and the point is made and things go on. A lot of us convention old timers are used to that by now. And once a couple of times this happens in a convention, they get the hang of it. So I think this is a solution in search of a problem. And in doing so, it creates a lot more problems logistically and time-wise, even more so, just as much as it would violate member rights. So I would be voting this down because I don't think I don't think it's something to worry about, to be fair.
I hope the committee will indulge me. I'm going to give you this information if my camera will show it. This is our convention floor for this convention. We've got 6 sections. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with a main.
I'm seeing it.
So it's circular. It's a circular 4. So you got 6 sections, 6 pieces of whatever that oblong pie is. And you got the 2 main corridors going up and down. The microphones are where the X's are. And then you got that main corridor down the middle. It's very similar to Orlando 2016. So that's the way the convention floor is going to look. Okay, who was next? Who hasn't spoken? Mr. Roulette will speak after, again, to his motion. I'm just going to go to Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm really in favor of some mechanism to filter out the deleterious motions that slow everything down. And okay, the idea of a single microphone as that filter probably isn't going to work. I want to offer another suggestion, and I don't know how Roberts is going to deal with this, but rather than limit the way and the number of people that can make their motions, what if motions were made by the delegation chairs? In other words, I want to make a point of order, or I want to make some kind of motion. I go to my chair, and the filter then is the chair says, "No, you're an idiot. We're not going to do that." Or the chair says, "Yeah, that's a good point." And then the chair stands to make that motion, the chair of the delegation. So the chair of the convention is really only dealing with the chairs and not every Tom, Dick, and Harry from the floor. So that's a suggestion. I imagine, Madam Chair, you can explain whether that's possible or not. but there does need to be some form of filter to cull out the wasted effort that we all spend. Thank you.
Can Yeah, I'll answer what I'm presuming is a parliamentary inquiry. That would require a bylaws amendment, not a rule, because you are taking away rights from delegates. And then you're making the convention chair be making rulings. Then do the delegates get to appeal that ruling? Appeal rights. If the convention chair doesn't think it's a good idea, I mean, the delegation chair, then you're just adding another layer. This actually makes it way more complicated. And there's still the timing issue. A delegate would have to still stand up and say, I want to raise a point of order. Now let me go confer with my delegation chair. Because what people I don't think are understanding, what points of order, they have to be raised immediately. You cannot have a delay. The minute another person has been recognized and starts speaking, unless it's a continuing breach of the bylaws, in which can be raised at every time, but that's not what most points of order are, you're done. You can't raise it. Your rights have just been violated. And honestly, our convention chairs aren't always the best filters. There are some state parties that I think this is a mistake on their part, but it's what they choose to do. They don't use Roberts. They don't understand the rules and what's an actual point of order any better than the brand new delegate does. Because there's some that use the democratic rules of order, which is probably the worst possible thing to ever use, except for Martha's, which Mike will get that joke, in a political party. There's at least one, I think, that uses the AIPSC, and some don't have at all. So part of this problem, honestly, is the fact that we don't require a uniform parliamentary authority across the party. So some people come to this convention better equipped than others due to the nature of their state parties. But I don't think what you've proposed, saves time. I also don't think it's, I think it would be ruled out of order by the convention chair, properly so. That's just my opinion. No, I would certainly allow you to try to substitute that. Now, if you'd wish to, you'd need to sit and think of wording and stick it in chat, but it would be you'd have to figure out where in the bylaws that would be, because that would be a bylaws amendment, not a rules amendment, because it really is taking away rights of delegates. And I can tell you,
one of the advantages, it strikes me as the way we currently operate, every single delegate has to be an expert in Roberts. And what we would be doing was we'd be requiring the delegation chairs to become expert. And in addition to providing that filter, I just think it would enhance their authority within their own delegation and within their own state, and would assist in the efficiency of the meeting when so many people. I mean, that would be one of the requirements of being a chair. You've got to be expert in Roberts so that you can move quickly and participate properly.
I'm not going to belabor the point, because the rest of it, I think, would be debate on my part, which I will not do. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. I'm sorry, Mr. Roulette. You're going to be after Frank Martin and Dr. Moulton. Then it'll be Mr. Roulette and then Mr. Seebeck. I remind everyone if we could try not to repeat points, if at all possible. Mr. Martin.
Yes, I want to thank Mr. Roulette for devoting the time to think about the matter of expediting matters on the convention floor. I do think that's important. I do think that Madam Chair has presented a way to do that through better management by the convention chair. And I have not heard any rebuttal of that here. So what I am going to do is move to call the question.
Okay, there is a motion to end debate, and that is not debatable itself. It requires a 2/3. There will be opposition. So, Mr. Bracco, if you would please call the roll. A yes vote means that we will then move to an immediate vote on Mr. Rolette's proposal. A no vote means debate would continue. Mr. Bracco, if you would please call the roll.
Sure. I will vote yes. Mr. Siselski. Mr. Siselski?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Latham.
Yes.
Mr. Martin.
Yes.
Mr. Rolette.
No. No.
Mr. Seebeck.
Yes.
Dr. Moulton.
No, definitely not.
Mr. Roberson.
Yes.
Mr. Logan.
Yes.
Okay, that is 1, 2, 3, 7 yes and 2 no.
I will not be voting. The question has been called. We will now move to an immediate vote on Mr. Rolette's motion. I don't think I have the actual wording on the screen, though I do assume everyone has read it. Here is the wording: is to add to Convention Rule 2 the language, it'd be subpoint 3, the chair may designate one microphone to be used exclusively for interrupting motions and may choose to only accept interrupting motions from that microphone. So this is what we are voting on. A yes vote will adopt this as the recommendation of the committee. A no vote will defeat it. Mr. Bracco.
I will be voting no. Mr. Siselski.
No.
Mr. Latham.
No.
Mr. Martin.
No.
Mr. Rolette.
Yes.
Mr. Seebeck.
No.
Dr. Moulton.
Well, I wanted to make an amendment. I wanted to debate this. I really don't like it as it is right now. If I had amended it, I would have voted yes. But since this committee is trying to railroad this vote, I will vote yes, even though I don't like it as written. So I vote yes.
Mr. Roberson.
Yes.
Mr. Logan.
No.
That is 3 yeses and 6 noes.
I will not be voting. The motion does not pass. We will be moving on to the next one, which is, because the next few were mine, I took the liberty of rearranging them to ones I think are more important to get to, and that is create new Article 8, removal from office, which is proposal NN. And I might need to stop sharing my screen in order to grab Mr. Latham's. I know he has some proposals. So, Mr. Martin, was your hand raised to be in line for this one, or is that an artifact?
That is an artifact. I apologize.
Okay. Okay, I will speak to my motion. It's going to be, there's one amendment. I thought I had. What did I? Mr. Latham said I missed officer somewhere, but I don't see that in my proposal. But I'm just going to read it out loud. This would strike, right now, our bylaws have Article 6, which is officers, and then Article 7, which is National Committee, which is basically everybody except the officers, kind of, though the officers are mentioned, but it's weird. There are 2 removal provisions. They're exactly the same, except for one uses the word officers and one uses the word members at large, because the LNC cannot remove a regional representative. This would strike both of those and create one new article that deals with them both, so that we don't have this redundancy. It would read, no party officer or at-large member shall be subject to removal from office except for failure to perform the duties of office or gross malfeasance. The process for removing officers and at-large members shall be the trial procedure as outlined in the party's parliamentary authority. The officer or at-large member's membership rights can be suspended by a 2/3 vote for up to 60 days while the matter is being investigated, if necessary, to prevent potential harm to the party. The subject party officer or member at large may appeal the removal in writing to the Judicial Committee within 7 days of receipt of notice of removal. Failure to appeal within 7 days shall confirm the removal and bar any later challenge or appeal. The Judicial Committee shall set a date for hearing the appeal between 20 and 40 days of receipt of the appeal and shall notify all interested persons, which person shall have the right to appear and present evidence and argument. At the hearing, the burden of persuasion shall rest upon the National Committee. The Judicial Committee shall either affirm the National Committee suspend. I meant to put removal there, so I'm changing that because that's what I meant. Removal of the member at large, there's where, of the party officer or member at large. That's where I missed it, so that's going to be my wording. The party officer or member at large, or order reinstatement of the party officer or member at large. Within 30 days of the hearing, failure of the Judicial Committee to rule within 30 days shall constitute an overturning of the National Committee. That should be removal of the subject member and restoring them to office at such times as the removal is final. The office in question shall be deemed vacant. I'm going to just let you know the things that changed between the language that was there before, besides combining the two. It used to just say that the National Committee may for cause. That is horrifically vague and ripe for abuse. So this time it says failure to perform the duties of office or gross malfeasance. It explicitly states that you have to follow the trial procedure and our parliamentary authority. That was ordered by the conventions. I mean, indirectly ordered by the delegates at last convention. There's a big confusion as to what happened at last convention with my alleged removal. They didn't say it was without merit, though, as I said on the list, I do think most people who are in support of me do believe it was without merit, but that wasn't the grounds. The grounds was a continuing breach of the bylaws by not giving me due process. If I was given due process and was still removed, everyone can think it was without merit all they wanted, and there's not a thing you can do about it because valid removals, whether you agree with the decision or not, are not subject to being rescinded. That's one of the items that simply cannot be rescinded. The only remedy to a removal you don't agree with is a re-election, because that was a question that was raised. So this codifies the continuing breach of the bylaws that was identified at convention. We had a weird language in here where it kept calling a removal a suspension. This is propagated out into the party who's copied the national bylaws. And what the National Committee votes to do is to remove the people. It's not to merely suspend them for a period of time. A suspension is temporary. They mean to throw that person off. Let's call it what it is. It's a removal. The suspension is what can happen pending trial, where that person's voting rights, debate rights, whatever rights they might have as an LNC member can be suspended pending their trial. The other thing that changed is that the burden of proof was completely screwed up. In my opinion, you're dealing with overturning the will of the delegates. The burden of persuasion should rest upon the National Committee. Right now, it rests upon the accused, which is just offensive to me as a libertarian. Also, if the JC just for some reason is completely dysfunctional and doesn't rule, our present rule says, well, if they don't do their job, then the person is removed. No, if the JC bugs up and doesn't do its job, then that person keeps their office. That's the other thing that changed. I believe the rest remains substantially the same. Mr. Latham had given notice first, so I do want to call upon Mr. Latham. I'm going to stop my share if he intends upon making that last, is that what you're intending upon, Mr. Roulette? I mean, Mr. Latham.
Uh-oh, what am I intending on doing? I did just post to the list, and I would kind of move that. It's a fourth substitute. My third substitute did not catch that suspension language, so I just put in the fourth substitute.
Okay, let
the
me look. I
removal
don't think I
language.
saw that.
No, I just barely sent it.
Okay.
So I think I'm trying to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. I just am maybe tightening up some wording. Maybe we can do a head-to-head or however we want to do it and go from there. But
oh, and something I didn't mention is that the existing, and I think you and I both agree on this, Mr. Latham, the existing article on JC jurisdiction will need to be amended. The substance isn't, it just needs to refer to Article 8 rather than referring to Article 6.7 and 7.5, because those would be deleted. That's all that would have to change there. It's more of a conforming amendment. It's not substitute. So okay. I'll be sharing my screen again in a moment. I want to put, I don't really know how we're going to do this gracefully, but I'm going to put yours up on the screen. I believe we agree on the JC language. That's not in dispute. So let me put this on the screen.
If I did do a little
no, this isn't yours,
comparison
is
document.
No,
do the fourth substitute that I just emailed to the list and also separately to you.
I think this is. That was.
Does it say at the very top, fourth?
Yes. All I took out was all I copied was your blue language, but it is the fourth. So let me put that back up.
Okay.
You didn't do the mark out language on this one the way you did on the third. That's what confused me. Okay.
Well, I don't know that I did mark out language on any. I did do a compare documents on the original proposal and then my last substitute. And so this fourth is largely the same, just for those three places where suspension or suspended was still used, and I just changed that to removed or removal.
This is, let me see if I can make this smaller. This is your language that's on the screen. There's no way to get it all on the screen. Would you like to explain what is different?
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up the document that and if people are able to refer to it, I'll just kind of go through that comparison. So for example, on where party officer is capitalized, I strike party and do not capitalize officer. I replace at-large member with member at large just to be consistent with elsewhere in both this proposal and the rest of our bylaws. I do that in the second sentence, also the third sentence, it looks like. And then I start to add. I just go on this third sentence, it started with the officer or at-large members. I just said the membership rights of the officer or member at large can be, and that's going to, well, okay. In the fourth version, it's now removed rather than suspended.
Well, that actually should be suspended there because that is a suspension there.
Okay, so let's leave suspended in that spot. So on the fourth, that ought to be changed.
Okay, I did that.
Okay. And then, so this language, if necessary to prevent potential harm to the party, I propose striking that. I just think it's extraneous. It also, as I mentioned in the discussion thread, creates a debate point and just kind of a time waster where someone might say, well, they investigated, but they never made a finding that it was necessary to prevent potential harm to the party. So they're just investigating for the sake of investigating, and there hasn't been the condition precedent. So that's kind of being assumed, I think, as to why you would investigate the matter to be looking at a suspension. So I don't know why we would have that. I think that, like I said, the extra language is just extraneous. The next sentence, I think, is largely unchanged, other than just the capitalization piece. The language after that, failure to appeal within 7 days, is the same.
Pardon the interruption. On that previous sentence, should those be removal or suspension?
No, it's removal.
Well, which sentence
Because
are we talking about?
the previous sentence said suspended, and this says removal. So which
Okay,
one are we talking about?
If we could let Mr. Latham finish, and then I'll explain, or Mr. Latham can explain.
Great. No, I don't think I can explain the difference at
Well,
this
I
point.
can.
So I will let you at when maybe when I'm done kind
if
of
you
with
could
the
continue with the changes, and then we'll entertain questions.
great question. And then judicial committee shall set a date, left that intact, just reworked the next one. And it's this notify all interested persons. And that's an existing, I think, language. When we redid the rules of appellate procedure on the judicial committee, we wanted to limit the potential universe of all interested persons. Maybe everybody on the planet is interested in this. And we just wanted to limit it to the petitioner and identified prospective respondents. Those are the folks who get to appear, present evidence, and
I
argument.
think you have a typo there. The judicial committee and shall the petitioner.
Yeah, that and should be stricken.
Okay, I'll take that out.
Um,
That's still the judicial committee shall the petitioner.
so let's
Notify?
not strike notify. Yes.
Okay, shall
Thank you.
notify. Okay.
And then, so next sentence, at the hearing, the burden of persuasion, that all stays the same. Judicial committee shall affirm the National Committee suspension of the, and we add officer or in 2 places there. Failure
You have
of,
another typo. The judicial committee shall either affirm the national committee's removal, not removed.
affirm the National Committee's. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm looking at the third substitute comparison document. So, and then let's see this next one, failure of the judicial committee to, and I struck rule and said make a final decision on the appeal. And rather than say make a decision, because we might, the judicial committee might make a decision to have another hearing or something else. So we want to make it a final decision on the appeal. So that's the thing that's the action item that starts the clock on the 30 days. And, ruling, I just don't think libertarians do rulings. And then I think, and then just, we have this language and restoring them. I just said restoration of that individual to office. And I think that last sentence then remains intact. And then I guess on the 2, we got to fix, if it's not Article 8, then it's got to be something else. I guess.
Okay, I would like to answer Mr. Seebeck's question, but I also am going to ask the committee. I'm fine with Mr. Latham's language, and I really don't want to get into dueling substitutes. I think the changes that he made are fine. And if there's no objection from the committee before I explain that suspension thing, is there an objection to me withdrawing my proposal in favor of Mr. Latham's? Say it out loud because I don't want people to lose their hand raise.
I'd at least like to ask questions.
Okay, we'll do that then. Just know that that's my intent. I'd like to answer Mr. Seebeck's question. The suspension is for the interim period, so that during the investigation and trial, say I always use the classic example of the treasurer who's stealing money. No, not saying that this has happened, but that is the classic example. You don't want that person to still have access to the funds in the interim. And Roberts allows you to suspend the privileges and rights of a person under investigation. It's not a removal, it's a suspension. It has an end period. They've been voted to be removed. They appeal. They've been voted. Hold on. I got to read this again. Okay. Once it's been decided that it's going to be referred under the party's parliamentary procedure for investigation and trial, that members rights may be suspended. It's a temporary, time-limited thing during the period of investigation and trial. That's not a removal. So that's why the word suspension is used that one time. Our current bylaws use suspension everywhere. We did have people during the situation with me who still argue to this day that pretend the convention never deemed a continuing breach of the bylaws, will say you were never removed, you were only suspended. You still held the office. You were just suspended. What the hell does that mean? I think we all realize that the intent of this article was to remove people. Somewhere in the 70s, somebody decided the word suspension is correct. It is not correct. It's not the word Roberts used. It's not the word, as far as I know, that any parliamentary authority uses. And the fact that at the end of this whole process, the position can be deemed vacant shows that the ultimate goal here is a removal. So that's why it says suspended in one part. I did not want the explicit invocation of, it's not terribly lengthy, but it's not immediate trial procedure to allow somebody who's, say, stealing money from the party to continue stealing money for 30 days. The party needed to be able to protect itself during the investigation period. So that's the difference between the two words. Doesn't mean anyone has to agree with me, but that's the intent of it. Now, I don't know who was next, but I'm inclined to recognize Mr. Bracco only because I really do want to withdraw my motion so that we're only talking about one of them. And I want to recognize Mr. Bracco for the limited purpose of answering questions that would help resolve any objection he may have to me withdrawing my original motion. Mr. Bracco.
So one difference that I'm not sure was mentioned is the use of the capital P party, capital O officer, and at-large member. So it's sort of like the way that these positions are being referred to. In the original, it's no party officer, and I think later it just drops the party, just officer, or at-large member. And there's a little bit of inconsistencies because they didn't start talking about member at large in a few places. Does any of this matter? Is really my question.
The part I meant to put member at large, because if you go up to the ones I'm striking, the National Committee may for cause suspend any member at large. I meant to retain that. So Mr. Latham had it correct.
Okay.
And party and officer, that's window dressing as far as I'm concerned. I'm fine with keeping it lower caps and removing the word party. That's obviously who we're talking about.
I withdraw any objection. I'm not sure if I officially made an objection because I'm not sure there was an official motion.
I made a request for a personal privilege. Is there any other objections to me withdrawing my wording in favor of Mr. Latham's? Okay, seeing none, then Mr. Latham's is the one that's on the table. The one I originally proposed is gone. Don't know who was first, but I see Mr. Roulette at the top, so that's who I'm calling on.
Okay. I'm broadly in favor of this. However, I have one concern, and that is a few years ago, we had problems filling the JC. And if we had that kind of thing happen again, which is not outside of all possibility, if the JC, for whatever reason, had any kind of issue, you could essentially never remove anyone from office, malfeasance or not. And for that reason, and basically because I think that JCs should need to act to overturn overturn basically anything that happened. Like I'll keep the debate short. I feel like that ought to be flipped, and so I move to amend where it said, like at the very last sentence, I believe, Yeah, failure of the judicial committee to make a decision shall constitute, instead of an overturning, just a sustaining.
I think it was in the original language because I flipped it. The original language, I think, said an affirmation shall constitute an affirmation. So you'd like to keep that as shall constitute an affirmation?
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, actually, I was of the opinion that you could do it, and we wrote one out there that you could do this by replacing it. It's covered.
John, JJ, I don't know if you realize you're on the.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I didn't think you realized. Okay. I'm just highlighting what we're taking out and putting in highlighting in green what the motion is. So now we're going to debate just the amendment. Did you wish to speak further on that, Mr. Roulette?
No, thank you.
Okay. Anyone like to speak to the amendment? I do, but I want other people to go ahead of me. Otherwise, keep your hands raised for when we get back to the original. Somebody just articulate out loud if you'd like to speak to the amendment. Who was that, please?
Seebeck.
Go ahead, Mr. Seebeck.
Okay, so this would flip it so that it would so that a failure to rule would affirm the original removal on the appeal. The same appeal which has the burden of persuasion resting upon the National Committee. I'll address that problem later back on the main motion. To me, this is putting an uneven burden all around because the person has been investigated and suspended. They're appealing. The judicial committee, the National Committee has to do the burden of persuasion, but they have the ball in their favor if the JC doesn't do anything. I don't think that that's the intention here, because if the intention is to have the burden be on the National Committee, then a failure to rule should not constitute the idea of them making their case. That sounds backwards to me.
Thank you. I don't know if there's anyone else on the appeal. I'm not going to make that point because Mr. Seebeck did, but there's another point I'd like to make that was, I'm sorry, who was that?
Oh, it's Rob Latham. And I think I'm neutral on this question. I will just, in looking at this, affirmation is, I think, how it works in our regular court system, right? So if an appellate court gets an appeal and they just don't act on it, they kind of leave the decision below in place. That said, I the affirmation part I think goes against the intention of the amendment, but I don't find myself. I mean, this is kind of, I think, a policy choice that we would have to make going one way or the other. So I'm undecided on this question right now.
Okay, so I'd like to speak to the amendment. Anyone else can go again. First, I want to deal with the issue of us not electing a JC. I'll remind everyone what the LNC did during that time. The JC hearing this was already, here's part of my problem, is when we raise objections that already existed in the original bylaws, and it isn't the part we're trying to fix, and it isn't the part that has caused a problem in the past. This JC language, though some of the burdens have shifted, has always existed in the bylaws. This isn't something new that we're adding. That has only happened once in the instance of the party. Can it happen again? Yes. But I remind everyone what the LNC did. The LNC still had a JC and said that they would be voluntarily bound by its decisions. We couldn't impose that burden on the party, but we solved that problem ourselves last time. If somebody wanted to get removed, nobody wants to get removed. If the LNC wanted to remove someone that term, we already voted that we would voluntarily subject ourselves to the JC. So there would have been the full appeal process. So in the event that happens again, that's what members need to insist that the LNC does. That was a motion I made because I wanted there to be appeal rights for members that could petition a JC that we voluntarily agreed to be bound to. At that point, it didn't occur to me in a million years that the LNC would remove somebody, because to me that should be something very, very rare. And I wasn't aware of the Angela Keaton case at that time. Removing someone from office is super, super serious. Not making a decision because perhaps everyone on the JC, say, has got sick should not result in a person elected by the delegates at convention. This is what I want to, I'll keep repeating this over and over. This is a small body of people deciding to remove someone that was elected by the delegates at convention. This needs to be taken with the gravity that that deserves. It should be extraordinarily difficult. And if it happens, I don't think we'll always see drama. We're libertarians. I don't think we'll see the kind of drama that happened with me and that I've since learned would have happened if they successfully removed Angela Keaton. Our two cases are eerily similar, as Mike Seebeck can attest to. So I am absolutely eerily similar. I'm absolutely opposed to this amendment. And it does completely go against earlier, as Mr. Seebeck mentioned. Dr. Moulton, then Mr. Bracco. If you wanted to speak to the amendment, Dr. Moulton, I'm sorry, I just assumed you did.
Originally, I didn't, but I do have a point on this. So first, clarify where we are. We're amending what to what?
We're striking, the amendment is to strike the word overturn and insert the word affirmation. So it would be that the failure of the Judicial Committee to make a final decision.
So I support affirmation for the reasons Mr. Latham talked about, that's the way it's done in the court system in general. So I think that this, as written, is wrong in both directions. I think that the Judicial Committee, if they don't say anything, then they're basically not disturbing what the LNC did. So that's the way it should be with our affirmation. On the other hand, I think it is too easy for the LNC to remove someone, which is an amendment that I would like to make at a later point, because we have changed this from 2/3 of the entire committee to a majority of the entire committee, which I think is a mistake. But I'll get back to that later on when we are through with this amendment.
We did not, though, Chuck.
We did. You say that we're using the procedure in Roberts?
Yes.
Roberts says it's either 2/3 vote or a majority of the entire committee or a majority with notice. That is the disciplinary procedure.
Hold on, I might be
you
mistaken.
have inserted a 2/3 vote just for suspension of duties, but that is different from the vote to initiate the disciplinary procedure. And in my opinion, the vote to initiate the disciplinary procedure should be 2/3 of the entire committee.
I'm going to look that up, but thank you. Mr. Bracco?
So I am a little bit torn. I prefer the overturning language between the two, but I think that and no JC positions being filled is a real potential problem. And I think that we might be doing a catch-22 here. Otherwise, I just relying on the LNC to sort of be honest and good people and such is not a good. I don't feel comfortable with that. Be bound even though we don't have to be. That That doesn't give me confidence. I don't know. I guess I would be, and I just don't know what the answer is. I just can't think of what it would be. Is how could you remove the stealing treasurer just because that's the stereotypical and a bad one? Like actually remove, not just suspend for the 60 days, but actually remove, and it would stick if the JC is not filled.
That's already a problem in our current bylaws. That's really all I could say there. There's a right to an appeal.
But it also says that if they don't rule, which they wouldn't if they don't exist, if it's an empty committee.
Well, if it's an empty committee, I wouldn't. I think that's a big argument. I don't think it's that they didn't rule; it's that they don't exist. They have to not rule on an appeal. How can you submit an appeal to somebody that doesn't even exist? I think it's a problem in our current bylaws. So but I don't really know what else to say to that. Mr. Szyzelski?
Yeah, I was going to say that for a while I thought it kind of odd that the JC failing to rule automatically upholds the action of the LNC. So I am in favor of it overturning. I think the solution here is to figure out, this issue if the JC doesn't exist, how that is handled versus automatically, the current issue, I guess, that already exists. If it doesn't exist, the appeal can't be heard. So I'm in favor of the original language as proposed.
Okay, thank you. And as a point of parliamentary inquiry, Dr. Moulton, you are correct. That wasn't, I don't think, Mr. Latham or I's intent. I'm glad you caught that. So be calling upon you for that amendment once that's in order. I did look it up, and you are absolutely and utterly correct. On the issue of the amendment, Mr. Seebeck cautioned us earlier that we have too many proposals and we're trying to fix every problem under the sun. The problem we have before us now is the big controversy that happened last committee, where we need to make it clear about cause and due process and burdens of proof. Yes, the JC thing might be a problem. It's a problem that already exists. That's not the problem that was put urgently before us at the last thing. Let's please stop making the perfect the enemy of the good. Maybe a future committee is going to come up with a very comprehensive proposal about how the JC gets filled if for some reason they're not elected at convention. Or maybe somebody, even though I can't guarantee we're going to get to it, can come up with a proposal for that. But please don't make that a stumbling block in this one. It already exists in our bylaws. We're not creating a new problem here. We can't solve world hunger with every proposal. Is there any further debate on the amendment? Seeing none, we're going to move to a vote on the amendment. So let me explain what the vote will be. A yes vote would strike overturning and insert affirmation. A no vote would leave it as overturning. Mr. Bracco, if you would please take the roll.
Sure. I am going to abstain. Mr. Szyzelski.
No.
Mr. Latham.
I'm going to abstain.
Mr. Martin.
No.
Mr. Roulette.
Yes.
Mr. Seebeck.
No.
Dr. Moulton,
Yes.
Mr. Roberson,
No.
Mr. Logan.
Yes.
Okay, that is 3 yeses, 4 noes, and 2 abstentions.
Okay, I will not be voting. The amendment fails. It remains as shall constitute an overturning. Dr. Moulton had indicated he had an amendment he wishes to make, so I'm going to call on Dr. Moulton first. Dr. Moulton?
Yes, the second sentence, which says the process for removing officers and members at large shall be the trial procedure as outlined in the party's parliamentary authority. I would like to add after that, comma, except that it requires a 2/3 vote of the entire committee.
I have just a question for you. Did you want to, as our prior language had, accepting I forgot how it worded, the person who's the subject of the removal?
Sure.
Because that was a recent amendment that was made. Let me grab that language. It says accepting the member that is the subject of the vote who may not participate in the vote.
Yeah, in fact, you could just copy that language.
Yeah,
like
that's what I was going to do.
Yeah, but even the previous language,
okay.
by a 2/3 vote for the entire national committee. Yeah, it's better than changing it, I guess.
Okay. Let me try to get that in there. I'm so glad you caught that. I would have been kicking myself. And I'm just going to try to take all this formatting out here.
Yeah, you might want to say, instead of by, say, except it requires or something like that, unless you think that it does the same thing. I don't know. I think we all know what we're trying to do. So whatever.
Let me tell you why I think it says the same thing is because the only thing it's really outlined is the trial procedure, not necessarily the vote.
Okay.
I think it does the same thing.
That is my motion.
Okay, I'm not going to mess with the striking and all that right now. I think we all understand. So what Dr. Moulton is doing is adding that red language, except for the by, which the B, which is for some reason stayed blue. So after the words parliamentary authority, he's adding by a vote of 2/3 of the entire national committee, comma, accepting the member that is the subject of the vote who may not participate in that vote. Did you wish to speak to this further, Dr. Moulton?
Yes. Well, I thought the previous amendment that was defeated should have been passed. I think it should be harder for the National Committee to remove people. It should be pretty hard in general. Without this amendment, it would be easier to remove people from office. It would just require a 2/3 vote without notice, or a majority of the entire committee, or a majority vote with previous notice. And I think that's a problem because there may be shifting factions on the committee who may decide to target someone they don't like. It still may be hard to do that because it requires cause. But we've seen previous committees that come up with shenanigans. So I think making it very hard to remove someone is the way to go about it. Thank you.
And that was my intent. I can't speak for Mr. Latham, but that was my intent. I did not mean, I thought it was too, like, you educated me on that section that you would think I would know very well, but you're also somebody who, unfortunately, through no choice of your own, had to become very familiar with that section, which is something I don't think either of us ever wanted to be intimately familiar with. Mr. Seebeck, we are only on the amendment right now. So if someone has their hand raised for the main motion, just tell me you're keeping your hand up. But if you'd like to speak to the amendment, Mr. Seebeck.
Actually, I wish to speak on the main motion later, but also on this amendment. So the first thing was to make sure I'm in the queue for the main motion. Second
Okay.
thing, just to clarify a question here. This language proposing to add here has to do with the 2/3 vote of the entire LNC, et cetera, for the removal vote. Is that correct?
Yes. After
Okay.
after the trial, the National Committee would have to vote by a 2/3 vote as Robert says, to declare them
Okay.
guilty.
Okay. Then that leads me to the third thing here, and that is the wording as currently proposed. I understand the sentiment, but it's clunky. When you examine the sentence with the proposed addition, it says the process is by a 2/3 vote, not the removal vote is a 2/3 vote. So I would suggest I propose I move an amendment to the amendment here to strike the word by and replace it with the words that with a vote of, excuse me. I want to make it so that it says that the vote is 2/3 is for removal by getting rid of the by and saying it's by a vote and saying with a removal vote of 2/3 of the National Committee. Does that make sense? The threshold needs to apply to the removal, not the process, is what I'm trying to get at here. And as currently worded, it applies to the process.
So just let me know your what is
okay.
the
okay. Was okay. The wording. Okay, strike by a.
Okay, because
at least a moment. Yeah.
It's so difficult to work. I tend to just do highlighting, so that's highlighting is gone. And
okay, with removal
with a removal vote, is that what you wanted?
Along that line, yes.
So you'd be striking by a vote and inserting by a removal vote so that we're not separating words to make it a proper amendment.
That actually, in that case, just put in that case. Wait a minute. In that case, just put removal between a and vote right where your
with
cursor's at.
removal by a. Okay.
There you go. That's got it.
Okay. Yes. And we can
and then leave the by a in.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. So you're just adding that word.
Yes. Okay. And the speak to it is very simple. It just makes it just binds the removal vote or the vote threshold to the removal itself and not the process itself, just to keep it as clear as possible.
Okay.
That's all I have to say about it.
Mr. Sazelski. Okay, so now we're on the amendment to the amendment. Mr. Sazelski, did you wish to speak to the amendment to the amendment?
No, I want to speak to the amendment.
Okay. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to the amendment to the amendment? I'm going to ask, is there any objection to the amendment to the amendment? Hearing none. Wait, Mr. Bracco, did you object?
No, I'm in line.
Okay. All right. So now we're back to a first level of amendment that I know can be a little bit hard to follow because the formatting on here and me trying to chair and do this kind of stuff at the same time is just very difficult. So the amendment is now adding with removal by a vote of 2/3 of the entire National Committee, accepting the member that is the subject of the vote who may not participate in that vote. Mr. Sazelski wanted to speak to the amendment. So go ahead, Mr. Sazelski.
Well, I guess the big thing I'm noticing here is the threshold on this one, 2/3 of the entire National Committee. And I agree with the higher threshold. No issue there. The issue I'm seeing is how that's conflicting with the next line. The membership rights of the officer or member at large can be suspended by a 2/3 vote. That's a 2/3 vote, not a 2/3 vote of the entire National Committee, I believe, right?
Yes. And so, that was intentional on my part, by the way.
It was?
Yes.
Is that what okay, so basically, I mean, I guess it could be, I'm just trying to understand here on on the procedure here because I guess it could be a little clunky for someone reading it if someone were to, have to initiate, this removal procedure against someone. It would theoretically be 2 votes that would have to come out of the LNC, a vote to suspend.
If they wish to.
It could be, yeah, it could be done in one motion, I guess, right?
Yeah, because yeah, if you combine 2 motions into one, as long as it passes by the highest of the 2 thresholds, you can do that.
Okay. I mean, I don't have an issue on that. I was just trying to completely understand that that's intentional, I guess, and that's what we want to do.
That was intentional.
Okay. I'm good then.
Mr. Bracco.
So I guess this is a parliamentary inquiry. So if the LNC has 18 members, then the one who's being suspended can't vote.
Right.
The vote of the entire LNC would be 2/3 of 17, not
Yes.
2/3 of 18, correct?
Yes, that's the way it was in my case.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Slightly, I mean, it's on topic to the amendment, so I am going to explain why there's the differing threshold. A suspension's a much less serious thing. The LNC doesn't have to do that because gross malfeasance can actually be that they were convicted of a crime that really isn't a crime on the LNC. You can, under gross malfeasance, because somebody was convicted of wife beating or something, that would potentially be grounds of some kind of crime that violates the the non-aggression principle. They may choose not to suspend their membership rights during that time because it's not like there's a threat to the LNC, which is why I had that language in there to protect the party. But I do agree it's redundant, and if the LNC is going to do that, it's a much lesser thing. But that's why it's a smaller vote, and that was in fact intentional. Mr. Latham.
I don't know if this is in order or if we're still voting on the amendment or what. I did have a proposed substitute amendment. It's in the chat. I just think that's so unwieldy, making that all one sentence. I thought we ought to just end the sentence after authority, period. And then just the amendment, it's in the chat, is after the trial, comma, a vote of 2/3 of the entire national committee, comma, accepting the member that is the subject of, actually, let's say a member who is the subject of the vote who may not participate in that vote, comma, is required to remove the member, period.
Well, the vote is part of the trial. Like, an investigatory committee prefers charges or not. If they prefer charges, then it goes to trial. The LNC votes at the conclusion of the trial. It's part of the trial. It's not after. It's the vote required to convict at the trial.
Okay. Well, and then I'll withdraw that one, but then I liked Mr. Bracco's proposal in the chat. I think replacing the word by with the word requiring. So after removal, just replace that with requiring. So it says removal requiring a vote.
I'm hoping everyone's following because I can't do all these kinds of markup. I'm essentially doing the secretarial stuff and the chair stuff at the same time, and I can't. So,
and that's great, except for there's an extra E in there. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. So it would be with removal requiring a vote of 2/3?
Yes, please. That's the proposed amendment.
Did you want to speak to that further?
I think makes it a little more clear rather than by a vote. Both the existing language does the same thing. I just think that makes it a little more explicit that that's what's required there.
Okay. I didn't get a chance to have my hand raised, so I'll get to Mr. Seebeck next, but I intended to speak next. I know Mr. Latham's a big boy and can take this, so I'm going to say something that might seem a little harsh. I'm going to ask that we please don't be endlessly wordsmithing these things to the point where it really doesn't make a difference. I think the two things are functionally equivalent. We are going to be meeting every week for 3 months if we keep doing this. But actually, I'm going to speak against it, even though I think in the English language, they're equivalent. In parliamentary parlance, by a vote is the correct language. It's parliamentary parlance is terms of art. And I think by a vote of is the proper way to say it in a parliamentary context. Do I think the meaning changes either way? No. But I'm thinking the committee, and maybe it's just me, y'all can rebuke me. I think we're getting frustrated by changes that don't make any substantive difference. That is just stylistic preferences, and I really would encourage everyone to stop that. Or we're going to start just calling the question a million times and have substandard proposals. Just my thing, but I'm speaking against it because it's not the way you speak parliamentary wise. Mr. Latham.
Okay. Well, I was inspired both by Mr. Bracco's post in the chat, but also JJ posted in the chat on page 631 of Roberts. And this last paragraph, E of 63:33. Anyway, it just says a majority vote is required. And then it says for expulsion, a 2/3 vote is required. So that language is in Roberts. But I'm good either way. I think that language to me is more exacting than by.
Okay. I'm just
and that, by the way, that's really all I had on this.
Okay. I don't care either way. I'm not going to vote unless my vote counts. It's been a year and these kinds of changes, maybe it's just me. I'm going to ask, is there any objection to striking by a vote and put it, and instead it will say requiring a vote? Seeing no objection, it's going to requiring a vote. We are back on the main motion. The amendment to the main motion. Does anyone wish to speak to that? Okay, is there any objection to the amendment? Seeing no objection to the amendment, we are back on the main motion, and I know there was people who wanted to speak to that. Let me try to clean this up now that we are back to, and I know these blues, was that a highlight? No, that was, what did I do? God, I hate Google sometimes. I'm looking for font color, right? Yeah, so right there. Oh, it's no highlight. Why is it none? Why is it doing? Oh, there we go. Now I want to take out the strike. I wish it had that strike through in the toolbar. That would make it so much easier. Okay.
May I offer you a trick on this?
What's a shortcut key?
No, it's a shortcut technique.
What is that?
If you highlight a word that has the correct formatting,
and
then you hit that little paint roller up there in the toolbar.
Where? Yeah, okay.
And then you drag it over the section you want to reformat to match, it'll take care of it.
Yeah, I probably won't be able to do that gracefully, but I'll try it next time because maybe I will be able to. I'm not the most cool. You've seen me run. So you know my coordination is good for a comedy sketch. Remember, I fell on my face in Denver and nearly killed myself just walking. There was nothing that made me trip. I just fell because
you were wearing heels.
I wasn't wearing heels. I was wearing flats. I just fell for no reason because my muscles and mind don't talk to each other. Okay, back on the main motion, Mr. Seebeck, did you want to talk or was it just that?
I did.
Go ahead. And then Mr. Martin.
Okay. I've been waiting to get back to the main motion to do this. Cleaning up the removal vote was a problem I had noticed that I was going to bring up, but we've taken care of that. Can we scroll down a little ways, please? Okay. Got a little too far. Bring it back up just a little bit. There we go. Okay. I've got a major fundamental problem here with this burden of persuasion resting on the National Committee on the appeal. The appeal is being made by the person being subject to the suspension and or removal. Okay. First of all, there's no appeal process for a suspension, and I think that's a hole. Just removal. Because the Judicial Committee's jurisdiction includes appeal of decisions made by the LNC. So we're missing a hole. There's a hole there that needs to be taken care of. The second problem is the idea of the burden of persuasion on the National Committee. When a person is making an appeal, the burden of persuasion is on the appellant, not on the respondent. By making the persuasion resting on the National Committee in this case, what you're effectively doing is creating a de novo trial with the Judicial Committee, rehashing everything that went through there, and that goes against the charter of the Judicial Committee, which has to do with was a decision of the LNC in accordance with parliamentary procedure and the bylaws. So there's a conflict there between this and a different part of the bylaws that has to be addressed. And the way to address it is if the burden of persuasion is with the appellant, not the National Committee. That seems to be backwards here. So that's the only thing I'm saying about that.
Okay, thank you. I had Mr. Martin. I'll go last. Continue, Mr. Martin.
Yeah, all I have is that the plural use of times in the last sentence seems awkward to me. I would expect it to be singular.
Yeah, I think that's just a typo, and unless someone complains at me, I'm gonna just do that.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Moulton.
I agree with Mr. Seebeck. I note that is a change from our current bylaws. Our current bylaws say, at the hearing, the burden of persuasion shall rest upon the appellant. Therefore, I move that we amend by substituting the current language, which is, at the hearing, the burden of persuasion shall rest upon the appellant.
Is that what that language said before? Let me see here.
Yes.
I think it said subject of the appeal. Oh, it does say
right above your cursor.
Okay, yeah. Got it. Let me just find it again. Where is it? Oh, right here. So I'm just gonna put appellant in here and highlight in green. This is what the amendment is. I missed the end. You guys get it.
Yeah.
Let's not be too autistic here. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Moulton.
Yeah, may I speak to this?
Oh, yes, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, this is just the way it works in every court. The person who appeals has the burden of persuasion. So this is really the way it ought to be, and it makes a lot of sense in my opinion. And Mr. Seebeck is exactly right. If the burden of persuasion does not rest upon the appellant, if it rests on the National Committee, then we're basically holding the trial again. It's a second trial. It's not an appeal. I think the whole point of this is for it to be an appeal, and if it's an appeal, then there should be some deference given to the National Committee, and that deference is that there is more of a burden on the person who is appealing. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe I had Mr. Latham. Did I have you ahead of me or not? I can't remember.
I'm good either way.
Okay, so I'm going to speak first. I want to give a point of information that I wanted to give to Mr. Latham before when I said I would have the AIPSC here. They give a list of valid causes for removal. And I'm going to go through these quickly. Continued gross, so the word gross is in fact in here. Willful neglect of the duties of office, which in part include duties of care, loyalty, and diligence in addition to fiduciary duty. 2, actions that intentionally violate the bylaws. 3, failure to comply with the proper direction given by the assembly or the board. 4, failure or refusal to disclose necessary information on matters of organization business. 5, unauthorized expenditures, signing of checks or misuse of funds. 6, unwarranted attacks on any officer, member of the board, directors, or the board as a whole on an ongoing basis. 7, misrepresentation of the organization and its officers to outside persons. 8, conviction for a felony. Examples of conduct that are not valid grounds for removal from office are poor performance as an officer due to a lack of ability. 2, negligence that is not gross or willful. 3, a tendency to create friction and disagreement, which is what I got accused of. 4, mere unsuitability to hold office. This doesn't apply to us. This isn't our parliamentary authority. I just thought people might find that interesting, that at least it made an attempt to define cause, which Roberts doesn't do, which is why I stuck this in here. Now,
Madam Chair, point of privilege, really quick.
Sure.
You seem to have inserted the amendment not in the correct one, but in your original one and not Mr. Latham's one, which I believe is below. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Let me, where was it again? The shall set. Oh, okay. Shall rest upon. So it's right here, and I'll fix out. Let me just finish my what I was speaking to. Yes, I realize in ordinary court situations, which this is not, and I realize this quite intimately considering I'm in the LNC is in the middle of an appeal right now where we're the appellee, and the burden of proof is upon the appellant in the civil case that we're involved in right now. And correct. That doesn't mean that's the procedure we have to follow on the LNC. This isn't, because I have to tell you that if there's grounds for an appeal in something like a criminal trial, I don't agree with our justice system. I think all the deference in the world should be given to the accused. And as libertarians, I just believe in that principle. And I don't really care that it's done differently in status civil courts. The fact is, this person, the subject, this hypothetical person was elected by delegates at in convention. And yeah, I don't care that it results in essentially another trial with a different person. This way, if someone is actually removed, no one could ever say that they were not given every opportunity. Okay, I'm not going to say no one. Again, we're libertarians. Most people, I think, are going to accept it and move on. However, I'm not going to cry. I will vote against it if my vote counts. But I'm not going to cry if it passes, because the whole reason that this even became an issue is because the LNC both denied me a trial and made me have to have the burden of proof upon me. Like, it was a double whammy in the opposite direction, which is the way our current, I think they interpreted the bylaws wrong. No, not that part, excuse me. That's what the bylaws say. I think whoever wrote these bylaws should never have used the word appellant in that way. But whatever, I had the double whammy in the opposite direction. I think when you're dealing with someone that was elected by delegates at convention, the double whammy should be in the other direction. The LNC should have great pause as to ever exercising this frightful power. Everyone knows my feelings on removals from office and expulsions of members, which I know we don't have in national, but some states do. I've spoken pyrotechnically against it in Colorado. My feelings are very well known. Yes, my intent is to make it that they have to go through it twice. This person had better be guilty as Satan to be able to be removed. I want it to be hard. to overturn the will of the delegates. We have elections every 2 years. You know, when it came with me, let's say I really was this just horrible friction causing person. You want to know how easy it is just to freeze somebody out? So the National Committee needs to find ways other than removal, except for like something where it is so worth it to have to jump through these hoops to get rid of that person. So yes, everything Dr. Moulton said was correct. And I purposely turned it on its head. And I absolutely stand by it. Mr. Latham.
So there's a lot that's accrued here in the interim. I wonder, do we need a motion to extend time? Although we did kind of start late.
We have 5 minutes, but at the end of 5 minutes, I would love to get through this proposal.
Okay. No, I do think we're close. So actually, I do want to speak to this, but also, so parliamentary question, does the 2/3 apply to the Judicial Committee? Is that the intent?
No.
Okay, thank you. So I actually do think the intent of this is basically a de novo appeal. And the reason I think it's actually appropriate here, this is not quite like a trial court where you're deferring to a trial court's finding of facts. And then if you're appealing, to an appellate court, you're saying, well, there was something procedurally inappropriate down below. And that's not what's going on in this kind of an appeal. It's a political body at the end of the day, even though it has the name Judicial Committee. And my sense is that if you put the burden on the appellant, you're requiring the appellant to prove a negative. And below you, we're requiring, the LNC to make its case. And so my thinking is if that burden is met by the LNC by a 2/3 vote in its committee, then it can be met by the JC by a majority. So I'm okay with the burden the way it is in the original by keeping that burden on the National Committee. So that's all I want to say about that.
And if I just may, y'all can yell at me if you'd like. Mr. Latham brought up an interesting point in law. It's actually not always true that the burden of proof is on the appellant. Even in our case, your use of the word de novo just reminded me. Those of you who are interested in the ongoing trademark case, there's actually 2 different standards that are being applied. One is the findings of fact of the district court are being reviewed under a standard of erroneous applications of fact, but her findings of law under a preliminary injunction are de novo. So it's kind of a mixture thing. But in the findings of law under the allegations of violations of the First Amendment, that's being reviewed de novo. So it's not exactly true in every circumstance that the appellant has the burden of proof. I was just writing something on that. I can't believe I forgot that. Mr. Seebeck.
Okay, a little party history here. California, 2009. We have a state executive committee member who was elected by the delegates and was suspended from the executive committee because he engaged in lying to the executive committee about an uncovered past felony conviction. I'm not going into the details of what happened there. Needless to say, it was not what people in the party or the philosophy would consider to be not a victimless crime. It was not. It was a chain of victim crimes. Regardless, the executive committee, which I was on, moved to remove him from the executive committee. He appealed, as was his right, under the state bylaws, which then are very similar to what we have the national one for appellate rights, to the state judicial committee. The state judicial committee at the time was charged with addressing whether or not the decisions made by the executive committee were made in accordance with the bylaws and the rules. What that judicial committee did instead was they violated those bylaws and proceeded to do a full de novo retrial of the case, and then voted, for reasons that we don't understand to this day, to overturn the suspension and reinstate the person in question. I don't want to see that happen at this national level because there's no reason for it. The side effect of what happened in California on that, which would not happen at the moment at the national level, is it caused the next state convention to go completely into executive session, the whole flippin' convention, to discuss this issue and come out of it to have a vote to possibly overturn the ruling of the Judicial Committee by the convention in accordance with the state bylaws. We don't have that in the national bylaws. Fine. The point is that there are ramifications that could happen from this if the burden of proof is on the National Committee on the appeal of a suspension. I mentioned it creates a de novo trial. And if that's the case, then why do we even have to have the first one in the first place? Just go directly to the JC on the front end without bothering to go through the trial process of the LNC. It's effectively would accomplish the same thing. It needs to be on the appellant because they're the ones that are making the appeal in the first place.
Thank you, Mr. Seebeck. We need a motion to extend time if we are going to continue.
So moved, if that's appropriate.
How long?
15 minutes.
Okay, is there any objection to extending time for 15 minutes? Hearing none, time is extended. Mr. Latham.
One more point I wanted to add. You read these Sturgis standards for gross misconduct, and as you were ticking those off, I thought, boy, that's actually quite low. And I even thought some of those grounds could apply to the past recent unpleasantness. So it is, a lower standard than maybe the title would suggest. And again, just coming back to this de novo question, maybe this is the lawyer in me, but you're not going to have appellate courts taking testimony. They might be reviewing factual findings, but it's not like another trial. So it is essentially, you're asking for a de novo proceeding. So de novo review of findings is not necessarily taking new evidence. There's a difference. And I would contemplate, based on the way this is structured, if the burden is going to be on the National Committee, there would be a second trial if the appellant wanted that. Or I should say the Judicial Committee might have the discretion. They'll just say, we want to look at the record that was below. I could see that scenario perhaps playing out. And so nobody has to, testify again or add new evidence or something like that. Maybe we need to clarify that. I actually did want to just point out this is off of the amendment, sorry, the 60-day thing. Just be thinking about, is that too short a time? What happens if the 60-day period runs and the LNC hasn't acted? What then? So that's it.
Dr. Moulton, and I'm trying to find how to raise my hand.
Just real quick. If we compare this procedure to what's in the existing bylaws, if we don't pass this amendment, changing the National Committee back to appellant, every one of our changes is stacking the deck more in favor of the person who is accused. We are raising the standard to failure to perform duties of office or gross malfeasance, which I'm fine with. We have made it. We have. Let me see. I don't want to waste time by rattling off all the changes, yeah. We are basically stacking the deck with all of these in the direction of the accused, and I think we're going too far in that direction. I think it's good that we're going more in the direction of the accused, which we already are by raising the threshold to perform the duties of office or gross malfeasance. I think it's good that we're adding the disciplinary trial at the LNC level. Those two changes I like, but I wouldn't take every single possible thing and stack it all in favor of the accused. I think we should have a somewhat fair and even-handed process. I don't think we need to make it impossible to remove someone. So I would urge people to just make this the same as court systems, change it from national committee to appellate, and let's move on and pass this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moulton. All I'm going to say quickly is with the trial procedure that's in place, again, I wouldn't cry if we switched it back. But yeah, I did purposely stack the deck in the other direction because I think it should be hard. I've said that a million times, so I'm not going to reiterate the points. But Dr. Moulton is correct, is that there were additional protections put in at the earlier stages. Is there any further debate on this amendment? Okay, I know there is disagreement potentially, but we're going to take a vote. Mr. Bracco?
Sure.
Oh, and let me explain. A yes vote would strike national committee and insert appellant for the burden of proof. A no vote would leave it as national committee having the burden of proof. Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to abstain. Mr. Siselsky?
No.
Mr. Latham?
No.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Roulette?
Yes.
Mr. Seebeck?
Yes.
Dr. Moulton?
Yes.
Mr. Roberson?
Yes.
Mr. Logan? Mr. Logan appears... I don't think I see him on the list anymore, so Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yeses, 2 noes, and 1 abstention.
Okay, that amendment passes. So national committee is stricken and appellant.
Madam Chair, you are not voting, correct?
Yeah, I'm not voting. Always assume I'm not voting if my vote doesn't make a difference. There would be very rare cases of that, but generally I do not. Okay, so we are back at the main motion. I think we're pretty close to getting to a vote on this, Mr. Seebeck. You're muted, Mr. Seebeck.
Sorry. Could you scroll back up a little bit? Just a little bit, please. Okay, that's good. That's good. Hang on. Okay. I had mentioned earlier that I thought I saw that I'd seen a hole about appealing the suspension upon further review. I don't think that that's necessarily a hole, because if that creates a different can of worms. If they can appeal their suspension and that changes turns a whole different clock on between investigation and appeals and everything, that creates an issue I don't think we want to get into. So I retract what I said earlier about there being a hole there. I really, technically there might be, but I don't, procedurally it just creates more of a mess. So I'm not gonna propose anything for that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Seebeck, is there anyone further? I'm petting my dog. Okay, well, I'm going to ask if there's an objection to passing this proposal. I will see, otherwise we'll take a vote. Okay, seeing none, this passes. We were going to go to 9:20 because there was a 15-minute extension, but my next one is not going to be done quickly. I really don't think any of the others are. If someone thought we should finish now, a motion to adjourn would be in order. Otherwise, we will start talking about the next one. Mr. Martin.
A motion to adjourn.
Okay, there is a motion to adjourn. Is there any objections to adjournment?
Madam Chair, could we take public comment after adjournment?
Certainly.
Then I have no objection.
Okay, we are adjourned at 9:14 Mountain, 11:14 Eastern. Remember, we are meeting next Thursday, and we will be starting with clear up quorum and terms of office issues.